He had torn ears, cold eyes, and a file stamped too dangerous to save. No one dared open his cage until a broken old man walked in. What happened next? It didn't just shock the shelter, it changed everything. This is the story of Bruno, and trust me, you've never seen a monster like this before. In the farthest, dimmest corner of the New Mexico rescue shelter stood Kennel 47, a space more like a warning than a home. The lights above it flickered. The air was still, heavy, almost anxious. And inside that steel enclosure sat Bruno, a Belgian Malinois with ears torn like old paper, claws dulled from years of pacing concrete, and eyes that didn't just look at you. They searched you, judged you, and dismissed you. A sign hung crookedly on the kennel door, screaming in bold red font. The letters were faded, as if tired of repeating themselves. Bruno didn't lunge at passers-by. He didn't bark like the others. He didn't even move when a family walked past, holding a leash and a hopeful smile. He just sat, still, watching, like he'd already seen everything worth seeing, and none of it was good. Most people avoided that last aisle. Even the staff only approached when they had to, and never alone. Bruno had been labeled unfixable. He had bitten a vet, snapped through reinforced metal, escaped 3 home, and been returned with notes like aggressive, terrifying, a mistake. His record wasn't a story, it was a list of warnings. That day, Caleb stepped inside the shelter, not looking for company, not looking for love, just looking for something that hurt in the same way he did. A retired war veteran, a father who had recently buried his only son. He didn't flinch when he passed the barking dogs. He barely noticed them, but when he turned the corner and saw Kennel 47, he stopped. Bruno met his gaze. No growl, no shift, just that cold, deep stare, 2 broken souls, recognizing something in each other that had nothing to do with teeth or trauma. Something that said, "I've been left behind too." A shelter volunteer appeared beside him. "You don't want that one," she said, half whispering. "He's different, he's dangerous." Caleb's voice was low, almost detached. "So am I." Without asking more, without needing a demonstration, he walked straight to the front desk and signed the paperwork. No hesitation, no second thoughts. While others feared Bruno's past, Caleb saw a mirror, and just like that, the dog no one dared to touch was going home. Not with a rescuer, but with someone who understood what it meant to survive and still feel alone. Bruno arrived in silence, caged like a prisoner of war. The transport van parked beneath the fading sunset, its engine still humming when 3 shelter workers stepped out, nervous, guarded, holding more fear than control. Bruno sat inside the reinforced crate, unmoving, his body coiled like a spring, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The muzzle over his snout looked more like a sentence than a precaution. Caleb opened the front door of the cabin, a modest, weathered place tucked against a quiet lake, and motioned them inside. The workers hesitated. "He's not like the others?" One muttered. "I'm not either," Caleb replied. With slow, deliberate movements, he knelt beside the crate and unlocked it. The metal door creaked open. Bruno didn't leap, didn't growl, just stepped out 1 paw at a time, calculating each movement like he was stepping into enemy territory. The muzzle came off next. Caleb looked him in the eye and said, low and steady, "You're free to go, but if you stay, I promise, no more chains, no more cages, no more pain." Bruno didn't bolt, but he didn't relax. For the next 4 hours, he paced the small living room like a ghost trapped between walls. His nails tapped against the wooden floor in a rhythm only he understood, quick, sharp, uneasy. Every creak in the cabin made his head snap. A gust of wind rattling the window sent him into a low growl. He sniffed every corner, his muscles tense, tail low, not curious, but calculating, waiting for the moment it would all go wrong again. Caleb didn't speak. Didn't issue commands. He simply watched from his chair by the fire, breathing slowly, reminding himself not to flinch. At one point, Bruno passed the glass sliding door. That's when it happened. He saw himself, his reflection, sharp and looming. In an instant, he lunged at it, snarling, throwing his full weight against the glass. The pane cracked with a thunderous sound, spiderwebbing from the impact. Bruno stumbled back, eyes wild, lips curled, tail tucked so far it nearly disappeared. Shards of glass clinked onto the floor like cold rain. Caleb stood slowly, hands down, voice steady. "It's okay. That's just you. You don't have to fight anymore." Bruno stared at him, chest heaving. His ears twitched, but his feet stayed frozen. body trembling from some old war no one could see. Caleb lowered himself to the floor, no closer, no pressure, and sat cross-legged, palms open, posture still. The fire crackled behind him, casting shadows that danced across the walls like old ghosts. Bruno didn't approach, but for the first time he didn't run either. And that was enough, for now. They spent the night like that. One man, one dog, both alive, both haunted, both trying to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't another trap. The next morning, after a night of silence broken only by the crackle of fire and the sound of pacing claws, Caleb sat alone at the kitchen table with a thick manila folder the shelter had given him. It was worn and water-stained, the corners curled, the edges soft like it had passed through too many hands, each one probably hoping for a reason to give up. He opened it slowly, unsure if he was ready to know who Bruno really was, or what had been done to him. The first pages were routine: intake records, breed analysis, weight, microchip data. Then came the notations, incident reports written in blunt clinical language: handler bitten, required 8 stitches, destroyed reinforced kennel overnight, escaped containment, recovered 3.5 miles away. But beneath the chaos was something more disturbing. Caleb flipped to a page stamped with a red warning: behavioral failure, MWD program. Military working dog. Bruno had been trained for combat, obedience, precision, loyalty. He had also failed. A handwritten note in the margin read, extreme response to verbal correction, shows unpredictable aggression, not suitable for unit deployment. And then another note, shakier handwriting, barely legible but unforgettable, corrected using shaving blade, escalated aggression after physical discipline, required sedation. Caleb's fingers tightened on the edge of the folder. His throat burned. Beneath the report was a faded photograph. A young Bruno, barely more than a pup, his ribs sharp beneath his skin, chained to a rusted fence post, eyes wide, unsure and already too old for his age. He turned the page. There it was, a picture that stopped Caleb cold. A little boy, no older than 8, arms wrapped around Bruno's neck, both smiling, both unaware the world would fail them. The back of the photo had a note in red ink: only successful bond. Child perished in residential fire 6 weeks later. No date, no name, just grief, frozen in time. Caleb set the photo down slowly. He didn't cry, he didn't speak, but inside something cracked, not out of pity, but recognition. Pain doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it leaves silence. Sometimes it leaves a dog who doesn't bark and a man who no longer prays. Now at least Caleb understood the truth. Bruno wasn't just surviving, he was remembering everything, and no one had ever helped him carry that weight until now. It happened on the 6th night. The weather had been calm all day, the lake still like glass, the pines barely swaying in the wind. Caleb had chopped wood in the afternoon, and Bruno, for the first time, had watched from the porch, not pacing, not growling, just watching, like he was trying to remember what ordinary looked like. That night, though, the sky turned. Clouds rolled in thick and black, swallowing the moon. Then came the wind, sharp, erratic, slapping against the windows like fists. Caleb lit the fire, checked the locks, and left a lantern burning in the corner. Bruno stayed near the far wall, head down, but eyes alert. He felt it before it arrived. When the first crack of lightning split the sky, Bruno bolted. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just collapsed into a corner of the cabin, chest pressed to the ground, tail tucked so tight it vanished. His claws tore at the wooden floor, scratching long, desperate lines as he tried to burrow into safety that didn't exist. Thunder rolled across the lake like distant gunfire, and Bruno began to whimper, a low, broken sound that didn't match his body. Caleb didn't move quickly. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached behind the couch and pulled out an old wool blanket, faded green, edges frayed. It had belonged to his son once, back when life was simpler and the house was full of laughter. He walked over slowly and laid it down on the floor, halfway between himself and Bruno. Then Caleb did something rare. He sat down, not in a chair, not on the couch, but on the floor, knees bent back against the wall. He didn't call the dog, didn't coax. He just sat, still, present. Bruno didn't come right away. He stayed curled, shivering, staring at the floor like it might open beneath him. The storm raged on, another flash, another boom, and Bruno flinched so hard his body thumped against the wall. But then he moved, inch by inch, paw by trembling paw. He crept across the room, not toward Caleb, but toward the blanket. He didn't sniff it. He didn't circle. He just lowered his heavy, battered head onto its edge, like a soldier laying down his weapon for the first time. Caleb didn't reach for him, didn't speak. He only looked and breathed. And in that small, fragile moment, the storm had nothing more to say. Bruno stayed there all night, not beside Caleb, not yet, but closer than ever before. He didn't return to his crate. Instead, he fell asleep next to the only thing in the world that smelled like safety. A blanket, a heartbeat, and a man who never asked him to be anything but still alive. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the air feels slower, where the world takes a breath. Caleb and Bruno walked the same trail by the lake they'd walked all week. Bruno's leash was loose in Caleb's hand, not from trust, but from a growing, cautious rhythm between them. Bruno walked steady, no tension in his steps, ears relaxed but alert. Caleb had even started to speak aloud on these walks, not giving commands, just talking. Little things, about the trees, about the weather, about his son. Bruno never responded, but he listened. Caleb could feel it. Then the scream shattered the calm. A woman's voice echoed down the block, desperate, panicked. "He's got a knife! He's breaking in!" From the yard across the street, a masked man vaulted a fence and sprinted in their direction, fast, wild, charging straight toward them. Caleb froze. But Bruno didn't. He moved without hesitation. No command, no leash needed. In one explosive motion, he lunged forward, planting himself squarely in front of Caleb. His teeth bared, muscles braced, a growl ripped from deep inside him, not savage, but powerful, controlled. The man stumbled, startled by the wall of fury in his path. He tripped, dropped the knife, and ran, arms flailing, breath ragged. Bruno didn't chase, didn't lunge. He just stood there, unmoving, between danger and the man who had never asked him to be anything other than who he was. Caleb dropped to one knee, reaching for the dog's face with shaking hands. His voice cracked. "You didn't need to change, boy. You just needed someone to see you." And Bruno, once labeled too broken to trust, simply turned and licked his hand. By Monday morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Someone had captured the moment, the masked man, the dropped knife, and Bruno standing firm between his owner and danger. A single photo, teeth not bared in rage but resolve, eyes locked, not wild but clear. A dog once feared, now immortalized in an image that told a story no one had expected. The photo spread faster than wildfire. Social media lit up with headlines, from shelter threat to guardian hero. The dog nobody wanted saved a life. Bruno, the beast of Kennel 47, turns protector. Reporters reached out. Animal advocates shared his story. Families who once crossed the street when Bruno passed now waved from porches. Some even approached, their voices trembling with the question, "Is it really him? The same dog from the shelter?" Caleb didn't explain much. He didn't need to. Bruno did the talking now, with quiet, with calm. He'd stand still when children reached out to pet him. His tail would wag, not fast, not frantic, but soft like a flag in peacetime. No barking, no growling, just presence. The shelter called, stunned. "We thought he was beyond saving," one staff member admitted. "We were wrong." Bruno didn't seem to care about the attention. Cameras, people, praise, none of it moved him. What did, though, was routine. His walks, his spot by the fireplace, the blanket Caleb laid out every night, whether Bruno used it or not. Then came the school invite. A local elementary asked Caleb and Bruno to visit and speak about second chances. Caleb almost declined, but Bruno, as if sensing the importance, nudged the old man's hand that morning and stood at the door, ready. Inside the gymnasium, children sat cross-legged, whispering excitedly. Teachers watched nervously as Bruno walked in, tail steady, ears forward. He scanned the room, then calmly lay at Caleb's feet, eyes half closed but alert. The kind of calm you only earn. Caleb stepped to the microphone, his voice low but steady. "If you call someone a monster long enough," he said, scanning the young faces, "they'll start to believe it. And when they do, they forget how to be gentle." He looked down at Bruno. "But if you wait, if you love, if you just listen long enough, sometimes the scariest soul becomes your bravest protector." The room was silent. A little girl stood up, walked slowly toward Bruno, and hesitated. Caleb nodded. She reached out, trembling slightly, and rested her hand on the dog's head. Bruno didn't flinch. He looked up at her, then closed his eyes. That single moment said more than the story ever could. Bruno wasn't just a rescue. He wasn't even just a hero. He was a lesson. That broken doesn't mean dangerous. That stillness can be strength, and that sometimes the ones we fear the most are the ones who needed us the longest. The world didn't need Bruno to become soft. It just needed someone strong enough to see past the scars. Because sometimes what we call dangerous is just a soul that's been tested too many times and survived in silence. Because healing doesn't always look like wagging tails and eager licks. Sometimes it's a quiet breath, a softened gaze, a head laid gently beside someone who finally stayed. Because not every wounded creature needs to be fixed. Some just need to be understood. Bruno didn't transform into a new dog. He didn't forget the pain, the corners, the storms. He simply stopped facing it alone. And in a world that too often gives up on what it doesn't understand, one man chose not to run. He chose to sit still and wait and believe. And in return, a beast became a guardian. A shadow became a shield. And the dog no one wanted became the dog no one would forget. Because love doesn't always soften the scars, but it makes them easier to carry. Together.